Host Greg Ambrosius, and I'm joined today by a special guest. He is Shawn Johnson, and Shawn is our newest inductee into the NFBC Hall of Fame. Shawn becomes our ninth player inducted into the NFBC Hall of Fame. We're going to give him a special induction in Las Vegas at the Mirage on Saturday, March 25th. Shawn, welcome to the show and congrats.
Thanks so much for having me, Greg. I really appreciate it. It's such an honor to be inducted into the Hall of Fame as the ninth member. I really looked up to those other members, Shawn Childs being a close friend of mine and the first member inducted. And, I always kind of had that in my mind. If I kept working, kept grinding it out, can I get to that level? And to get there really means a lot to me. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, you're when you come to an auction or a draft, you're a paper and pen type of guy. You're not really a laptop guy. I don't think I've ever seen you even bring a laptop. That's why we got you right now on screen like this. But have you ever brought a laptop to a draft or an auction?
No, I prefer. I think that's one of the things I'm known for is the
Yeah.
sheets that I bring into a draft room. So my profiles on the players take up about a third of a page, and it gives me all kinds of information on the player.
Yeah.
So when I'm making those split-second decisions on a guy, anything I need to see, because I don't have to memorize it all, right? It's all right in front of me to
Yeah.
help make those decisions. So that's been part of what I do, and it's been I think a little more, it's been helpful as far as
Yeah.
helping me along the way.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, I know you were surprised last week when I called you and told you that you were going to be inducted in the NFBC Hall of Fame. Most people don't expect that phone call. I'm sure you didn't either. But now that you've had time to digest it, I mean, how does it feel to go into the NFBC Hall of Fame? This is a hobby. It gets kind of corny when we talk about Hall of Fames, but you've stood out among hundreds and even thousands of players in our history. How does it feel to be going in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I mean, as a competitor, that's one of the things. Like, you want to try to be the best at what you do, whether it's a car mechanic or a football player or whatever it is. And I've been putting a lot of effort into becoming the best fantasy baseball player I could be, making small strides along the way, and seeing it kind of pay off year over year, getting a little bit better, a little bit,
Mhm.
you know, kind of zone in with my process and cutting out the stuff that was wasting my time and really focusing on what pays off and helps me win leagues. And over the course of that 10-15 year period, getting to the point where I can compete with the very best and be successful at it. It means a lot to get there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, like you said, there's only 8 other players in the NFBC Hall of Fame. Shawn Childs and Steve Jupinka were the first class inducted. Then Lindy Hinkleman, David DiDonato, Dave Potts, Mark Cerebro, Casey Cha, and John Posma last year. How does it feel to join that elite class of players?
Yeah, it's insane. I know I competed against Casey in the most recent Diamond auction, and I know we
Yep.
battled over some players. Joe Ryan in particular. I was planning on getting him for $5 easy, and then I go 6, and he goes 7, and I go 8, and he goes 9, and now I'm in a bidding war with the NFBC Hall of Fame. Or what do I do? I ended up letting him have him, but that's something in the back of your mind when you enter a league, that you're going to be competing against really really talented players, and it really helps. you know you're going to have to prepare and get there where you can compete with them, and then obviously I like a challenge being a competitor, so I'm
Yep.
always happy to go up against the best.
Yeah, you don't play in a whole lot of leagues with us each year. In fact, you've only played in 48 leagues and 14 seasons. 6 is the most you've ever played in any single season, yet you play a lot of high dollar private leagues. Explain your strategy in limiting your leagues each year and wanting to join those higher dollar private leagues.
Sure. So I think the fab process takes pretty much my entire Sunday.
Hmm.
I'm getting up roughly at 10, 11, and I'm grinding fab all day long. So I have to limit my fab leagues. 8 or 9 max for
Yeah,
me is what I can handle as far as that goes. And then if I wanted to pour more leagues on, it would probably be more of the draft champion type of league where I can just set the lineup, set it and forget it.
right.
Um, so um, so that's kind of been what I've done to get the most bang for my buck as far as getting as many leagues as I can without overdoing it on Fab Day.
Right.
So that's been my magic number, about 8 or 9 leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have improved Fab, just so you know. Take a look at that video that Derek and I did because we've really put it where you can have all your leagues on one page this year. Use that player watch list, use the pending Fab page, and I promise you, you're going to save time on Sundays this year. So let's look at your resume a little bit. Like I said, you've only played in 48 leagues since you joined us in 2007. Yet you've won 15 league titles and you've cashed in over 54% of your leagues. I mean, that's insane. You have won 31% of your leagues against tough, tough competition. Any reason how you've been able to do that?
Well, I think there's definitely an element of luck involved. There's no sugarcoating that, because but I think helping to mitigate my luck has been part of my process. As far as the studs that I look to target are typically the durable type of players. Like Lindor has been a player I've drafted year after year after year. So I know he's tough, he's durable, he's grinding in the offseason. I
Mhm.
trust that type of player. So I think part of it is the studs that I target, and then really mining the sleepers, really going after the players that go from ADP 150 to 350,
Yep.
studying them, till I get sick of it, and then finding that guy that I can get for a buck or two that I know can be a 15, possibly $20 player. So getting the durable studs that aren't going to let you down, and then getting the right sleepers has
Mhm.
been more or less my strategy. And then another a big adjustment I did is the worst year I had was 2017,
Mhm.
and that ended up being the best year I ever had because after I took a beating that year,
Yep.
and I went and I reevaluated my process that off season. Prior to that, I had always been focused on the player pool for this season. Let's find this year's sleepers, and I never really focused on my overall strategy. In
Mhm.
that 2017 offseason, I spent a lot of time on my strategy as far as how I wanted to build my teams, my roster construction, position scarcity. And I went from a strategy of really targeting hitters early, 8 hitters out of my first 10 picks. I was always going hitters with my first three, bang, bang, bang.
Mhm.
And that offseason, when I did a lot of research into my process, I realized that the big change I needed to make was to elevate the starting pitchers and value them properly,
Mhm.
because every starting pitcher is roughly 14% of your pitcher stats versus every hitter is roughly 7% of your hitter stats.
Right.
So those pitchers are just more impactful, as far as that goes when you compare them. Even though the hitters, yes, they are 5 categories versus a starting pitcher is 4, but their numbers are more meaningful on a week to week basis. So when I started to attack it as a pocket aces type of strategy, where I was taking 2 aces within my first 3 or 4 picks, and I
Mhm.
did that in 2018, 19, 20, and the last 4 years. Those have been my most successful years making that transition.
Mhm.
So that's been huge for me.
Yeah, definitely. You've won actually 11 out of the 20 leagues that you've entered since 2018. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the most amazing accomplishment is in the Diamond Auction League. And I don't think anybody can comprehend this. You probably can't even comprehend it, but you've won that title 5 of the last 6 years. The Diamond Auction League, that's a $10,000 entry fee, $75,000 league prize. You've won that 5 of the last 6 years against some of our best auction players. Can you explain how you do that? And does it even amaze you that you've won 5 of the last 6 titles?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's that league is the most high stakes auction league on the
Yep,
planet.
yep.
And to have that type of consistent success, the first year I won it that was before I implemented my pitcher heavy
Mhm,
strategy. And I remember that year too. I took John Lester was my first arm at about $15. Then I had Hendricks at 8, and then I had a bunch of sleeper arms, 2 closers, and just a badass
mhm.
hitters, right? And that's how I typically built my teams at that point. And I just got lucky that year on hitting with the Cubs. Just that was the one year that they just all, Hendricks and Lester had monster years. But when you do that, it's like building a house on 2 legs, right? And because you can't count on those $5 arms. So when you
Yeah,
lose one of those legs, like say Lester underperforms, now it gets a little wobbly. But when you
Yeah.
have two big arms and then you have a pretty solid third and a solid fourth, now you have a house that's more like on four legs, and you could take a hit to one of your legs and still get there with your pitching stats. So, but yeah, so um, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely I'm feeling I'm really encouraged by the last few years, and but I'm not taking it for granted, and
Mhm.
still grinding this off season to try to get better and better.
Yeah. So Marcus Cerebral asks, will you own DeGrom this year? I looked at the Diamond Auction League. He was your ace at $37. Ultimate Auction League, which you also won, he was your ace at $38. Now you say you do like pocket aces, but he was really your ace last year on both of those teams. Is that the strategy again this year? I mean, you got to make sure you have at least one good ace, right?
Yeah, totally. If I was drafting today, I think Degrom would be a prime target of mine. Um, because if he pitches a full season, you can't assume he's going to go down. He's healthy now. If he
Hmm.
gives you 200 innings, he could be a $50 player, and
Right.
that you can't find those. They don't grow on trees. There's only a couple of them in the player pool. So yeah, you are taking on a certain amount of risk, and I always document the risk I'm taking on next to every player's projection. That's kind of how I do it. Like even with a player like Buxton, I have his full projection for what I think he'll do if he does stay healthy and plays 150 plus games, right?
Right.
But then I have a little note next to his projection that says, 80% chance of DL stint. So I know
Yeah.
if I'm taking it, yes, I can expect this if he stays healthy, but this is the injury risk I'm taking on if I do take that type of player.
Right.
So when I have DeGrom's projection, it blows my mind. And then, the note next to it does say 50% chance of DL stint, but that might be a risk worth taking, in my opinion. I definitely have him probably as my number two, maybe my number three overall pitcher on my board. And yeah, I think he's a good gamble at this point,
There you go.
assuming he
Start
looks good in the
start
spring.
betting, folks. It's going at 35. Do I hear 36? Yep. I might even be the auctioneer for that one. We'll see. So we'll have some fun with that. But yeah, when I look at the Diamond League, you only had two players over $30. And in the Ultimate League, you only had one player over $30. Now, I kind of see you as being a $10 to $20 bargain hunter. You talked about your sleepers between 150 and 300. When you're in an auction, am I correct? Are you looking for those $10 to $20 players rather than three $30 players?
Yeah, I usually like to build a pretty balanced roster in these deep 15 team leagues because the replacement level value is not that good, right? If it's a 12 team auction, it's a different animal, but so but I have been in some situations where a lot of people are thinking the same things I am in a room, and the studs are, I'm expecting them to go for 40. The studs are going for 34, 35, and I'll buy a couple studs in that type of environment.
Mhm.
But in a normal environment where the studs are going for 40 plus, I'm usually letting those bats go. I might grab one arm at that cost and look into bargain hunt.
Mhm.
So, some of it will depend on what the draft gives me, but I would prefer to build a more balanced roster, especially with my bats, as opposed to taking like an Acuna and a $1 guy. I'd rather have a couple, $20 guys.
Right. But you aren't afraid of $1 guys. I mean, in the Diamond, you had five $1 guys, and I've seen you with even more than five $1 guys where you're sitting at the end and you're still looking for that $1 guy. You're not afraid of that in a 15 team format, are you?
No, absolutely. I feel very comfortable in that spot
Mhm.
because I spend so much time evaluating the $1 players. So I know if I have my plan and I always try to execute it, but things are never going to go perfectly. So if I ever get in trouble at a position, I have my list of targets and I know exactly where I'm going for a dollar if I get into a bind.
Mhm.
So I know Brian Reynolds was one of my guys. I think it was 2 years ago when he was the three-hole hitter for the Pirates, and I got in a bind in the Diamond auction where I had to fill my outfield spot for a buck, and I knew right where I was going, right to Reynolds, bang, and I
Yeah.
took him and ended up being a huge. So I think that's part of it is just having your backup plan. If you get your targets, great. If you get stuck and you're looking for a $1 guy, be ready to have your list of guys that you're going to go to in that spot at each position,
Yep.
and that's something I do.
Yeah, definitely. In the Ultimate Auction, you had Aaron Judge for $22. Now, you didn't have him in the Diamond, but was there something in Judge that you saw? Can we give you credit for that? Or was that one that you had no idea he was going to hit 62 homers last year?
Yeah, so with that type of thing, this is what I look for in like I try to evaluate players based on what they'll give me in their 50th percentile
Mhm,
type of season, right? But what I look for is a player, usually a player when they get to their contract year, that's the kind of player I'm looking for to maybe give me an 80th percentile or a 90th
mhm,
percentile type of season. Because when you're going into a contract year, you got your agent on the phone saying, listen, you got to get it done this year because it's all on the line.
mhm,
Your entire future is based on what you do this season. And so that's the type of off season that a player is going to be grinding in the weight room, grinding, with their conditioning. They're not taking that extra vacation. They're going to be hitting in the BP, and that's the type of thing you see with the players because they're human, right? They want to cash in on their contract year.
mhm.
Even when you look at Stanton's contract years last year with the Marlins, he had 59 home runs, right? So that was type of thing. I had a feeling Judge might have a monster year because he was entering that type of environment where it was just you had to do it. Now coming off that season, now you have to look at Judge a little bit differently this year
Mhm.
because now he's set for life. Now he
Yeah.
may take that 1 month vacation to the Bahamas. It doesn't matter what he does going forward, financially at least. He's getting paid no matter what he does, right?
Yeah.
Like Chris Davis might be an example of that, right? Because he signed that big deal with the Orioles, and then it just went downhill so fast.
Right.
You kind of have to assume he just wasn't grinding, wasn't working hard with his training.
Mhm.
So, I may reevaluate Judge now that he's out of that contract year, but that was something that, and I did it with Yelich too. I owned Yelich in his year coming off the Marlins to Milwaukee,
Mhm.
and he was a target of mine. And when I looked at Yelich, he was hitting 20 bombs a year with the Marlins, and Miami's park is, 80 park factor for left-handed power. Now he's going to
Right.
Milwaukee where it's 130. So it's a 50% difference in the amount of home runs you'd expect him to hit it during, for his
Mhm.
home games. So I'm looking at that. I'm like, dang, maybe he hits 20 bombs in Milwaukee. That puts him at 30 on the season. Now he's a 30-20 guy that hits 300. I'm like, dang, that's a first round guy going in the fourth, fifth round, right?
Right.
So those are the things I look for, a big switch in park, a contract year, and then any type of velo jump I see or spin rate increase with the arms.
Yep, definitely. All right, let's talk about closers once. You got Gregory Soto for 7, Scarp Barlow for 9 in the diamond. You did go for Raldis Chapman for 14 in the ultimate. What is your process when it comes to closers? It kind of looks like you go for second tier closers mostly. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm looking to get that. I definitely want to fill the position because when you get your two closers, that gets me to my 70 saves with
Right.
my projection. So I'm always looking to buy two of them, and I'm looking to spend as little money as humanly possible doing it. So that's the tier I really want to shop in. If I can get a value on a stud on draft day, I'll take it. But in a perfect plan, when I go in with my draft plan, that's the plan. It would be to take two of the mid tier guys, looking to spend about $20 for the two.
Okay. So when I look at your two auction leagues and even your auction championship leagues, I don't see a lot of the same guys. DeGrom was the ace on both of the diamond and the ultimate auction, but I don't see you concentrating on one strategy for auctions and using it for all four of your auctions per se. Am I correct on that? Because I did notice a lot of different players on your rosters.
Yeah, part of it is that I kind of take the entire player pool, and I'm willing to take anybody
Hmm.
depending on the price. So my rosters will be a lot different from auction to auction based on the draft I'm in and what they go for and what the room gives me. Um, Part of it is I do like to diversify a little bit with, especially with my studs, so
Hmm.
that I'm not relying on one particular player. And if he goes down, I'm going to be potentially wiped out for the year. So I do like to diversify a little bit. Um, but yeah, I think just knowing the player pool and being willing to take any guy, even if it's a guy I'm, planning on fading, I still have a number that I would buy that kind of player on draft day. So
Hmm.
being ready to buy anybody, I think is
Yeah,
important.
makes sense. So you do a lot of auctions. You're also successful at drafts, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But what do you like better? The auction where you got a shot at every single player or the draft? Or do you like them both? And which one's even harder, auction or the draft?
I definitely prefer auctions. It's you can it's like a choose your own fantasy. You get to build whatever you want, and it gives you just so much flexibility. Um, I think there's a lot more skill that is involved in an auction, and I think it takes a lot more prep, and especially leading up to the draft. And then it's tough to execute. It's a challenge.
Right.
Snakes are, I like snakes too. But it's a different animal.
Mhm.
But it's hard to say what is like. I think the auctions are tougher, but they are more rewarding, and it gives you a chance to build the roster you want. Whereas a snake is a little more constrictive as far as that goes. You kind of
Right.
got to take what ADP gives you a lot of the time.
Yep. Yep. You're at the mercy of your draft spot, obviously. So in both formats, you have to grind and fab. There's no doubt about that. And I must say, I think you might be the best grinder of fab in the NFBC. And I looked at all your conditional bids. I looked at all of your bids every week for all of your championship teams. And Shawn, I have to admit, you are the biggest grinder. I saw one string you had with 34 conditional bids. A lot of your bids, you have 20 or more conditional bids. And you laugh when I'm saying that, but you know how much time you put into it, and you turn over your roster 3 or 4 players every single week. So again, I got to talk about the conditional bids. You put a lot of time into that, and I mean all the way down to the 34th guy. If you're going to turn over a player, you're willing to get that guy, right?
Yeah, totally. Um, it's tough because I like to you know, during the season, I take almost a whole week off. I'll check the box scores, I'll check the standings, but I'm not putting in a ton of time midweek, and then I just pile it all into a Sunday. So and I kind of enjoy the process, really. Doing the research. It starts there. With the new players coming up, maybe a new player is entering the lineup as an everyday guy, and then researching that type of player. But that can take a middle of the road team and make it a team that cashes if
Hmm.
you hit on the right type of fab. And then you got to churn your roster over. You can't keep certain type of guys the whole season that clog up your bench. You got to take that shot on a new up and coming type of player. So yeah, it's just, I would say 70% of it's your draft prep, and then like maybe 15% is executing your plan on draft day, and then that last 15 that gets you over the hump is how you handle fab.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I look at championship rosters, it's people who turn over their players a lot. Again, 3 to 4 players every week. I talked about this in Arizona Fall League, and I said to Vlad, "Do you do that as well?" He said, "Absolutely. I think most guys turn over." What are you looking for when you're turning over 3 to 4 players per week? Do you have guys on your bench that you're like, "There's no way I would play this guy. I need to find somebody to replace him." Is that what the turnover is all about?
Yeah. Part of it's trying to find that new player that just got into the lineup, and he played 5 or 6 days in a row, and
Mhm.
he could become an everyday player, and getting him on your roster just to see if he sticks. And we saw some examples of that with Strider being huge, Harris.
Right.
I picked up Kirby in the Diamond Auction. He was a difference maker.
Hmm.
Um, and then trying to find those players early on in the season's important, because when I picked up Bard as well as a free agent, and I got to use his stats for 6 months. Once you get to the end of the season, you pick up a guy. He can certainly get you over the top, but you only get him for a month or two.
Right.
So I think the first couple months of Fab, if you pick up the right guy, it could really make a difference for sure.
Yeah. So let's look at your history. You joined us in 2007. That was our fourth year of the NFBC. You joined one league. You joined the Ultimate League, and you finished second in that one. It was a draft league, obviously. Do you remember how you found the NFBC?
Um, yeah, I think I did a search, and I did a little research of what fantasy leagues, had the highest stakes and the best reputation, and the NFBC was number one. So that's I decided to join based on that.
Cool. All right. So, yeah, you took second, like I said, in the Ultimate League in 2007. You joined again in 2008. You again took second in the Ultimate Draft League, and you joined a main event. You took third in your main event. You finished 48th overall. What made you decide to jump into the main event after just doing the private league?
I think like once you get a taste of it and how fun it is, that's when you kind of want to expand. And I remember early on in my experience, I really really liked it, from the jump,
Mhm.
and I definitely wanted to get into more leagues, and that's kind of how I started to dabble with different formats at that point.
Yeah, you've competed in the main event only 5 times. You've finished second once, third twice, fourth twice. You finished in the top 30 overall twice in only 5 attempts. Why not play more main events, or has the private ones just taken up so much of your time?
Yeah, I think I would love to play more mains. My only thing is if I added like 3 or 4 main events onto my then now I'm talking like 12, 13 leagues and
Right.
dealing with that much fab. Although I am interested to see this new process because if it could streamline things for me, I may be able to add 3 or 4 more teams based on how that new change goes with the fab system for sure.
Yeah, definitely check it out. And everybody check it out. I guarantee you it is much more simpler now. The key again is putting players into your player watch list during the week, and then they'll flow into all your teams on Sunday by using the pending fab page. You're going to love it. So, all right, let's go on a little more about your history. You first joined NFBC League title, or you won your first NFBC League title in 2009. You won a Super League title that year. Talk about winning that first league title after finishing second in the Ultimate 2 years in a row. You finally got over the hump in the Super and won that $20,000 league prize.
Yeah, I I actually was thinking about this yesterday. Because I had some really, really tough moments early on in my career. I had a second place finish where I lost by 1 point and I needed one more home run. And I had a chance for that extra home run because there was a 163rd game that year.
Yeah.
The White Sox were playing and they needed to do the play-in game for the playoffs. And I had Canerco. So I had another chance. And I watched that entire game and I was just begging for a home run because that would have given me the point in homers and then a half a point in ribbies and gotten me the title and he just didn't come through for me. And then of course I'm beating myself up because I had tons of chances with every lineup decision I made to get that extra bomb
Yeah.
at some point, right? And then maybe a year or two after that, I had a tough loss too, where I finished in second by a point. Where if I had streamed my pitchers properly at the end of the season, I didn't even know the rule at the time where you could switch them.
Hmm.
That was the one year that you could take your
Right.
pitchers on your bench and put them in on Friday, like you can
Yep.
with the hitters.
Yep.
I didn't know that rule had been implemented, and if I had known that, I had a couple of guys that were stuck on my that I couldn't put in the lineup. I had them, they're pitching Wednesday or Thursday, and they were locked in my bench. And if I'd known that rule,
Yep.
could have gotten those extra wins and Ks that would have gotten me that title too. So I had those two really bitter losses. I'm like, dang, is anything ever going to go my way? And then it finally did. So
Yep. Good.
sometimes those losses are the best things for you.
Yep. Well, good job winning that first title in 2009. You won another title in 2013. That was the NFBC 12. We were trying to get that 12 team national contest going. You won the league title then. You finished fifth overall. Now, you've got a history of doing pretty well in the 12 team formats. Why do you think you have been so successful in the 12 team format?
Um, I think part of it is in a 12 teamer, it's a different animal. You want to target the scarcer positions, get some studs at catcher. And so I've, tried to roster like a JT Realmuto type in those spots, a Sal
Mhm.
Perez. So that's been part of you kind of have to evaluate your strategy. So I've been, pretty fortunate to hit on some of those type of builds in my 12 team leagues, which has
Mhm.
been, I don't do a ton of 12 teamers, but I know I have
Right.
at least one a year, and that
Yeah.
was one of them.
Yep. Yep, definitely. Good stuff. So, okay, in 2016, you finally joined a Diamond Auction League. You had some success and you joined that for the first time in Las Vegas, and you won that $75,000 grand or league prize. You also won your first NFBC Auction Championship League that year. You finished second overall. Talk about joining the Diamond Auction League for that first time and almost winning that national title in our auction championship.
Yeah, yeah. I think we talked a little bit about that before with my Cubs build with
Mhm.
my Lester and Hendrick stack. Um, I was just super fortunate that sometimes that happens too. I had a Jose Ramirez Lindor stack one year, and the Indians went off.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about when you're building your rosters. If one player does well, the next player in the lineup may as well, and you may, so you can kind of double up there.
Hmm.
And you see that with daily fantasy a lot too.
Right.
But yeah, that was sweet, to win that in the first year, and you know, that was something for sure that I'm really, really, really proud of.
Yeah, definitely. You talked about 2017. That was a tough year. You finished seventh in the Diamond Auction League. You didn't win any prize money. But since then, from 2018 to 2022, you've entered 20 leagues. You've won 11 of them. So that's like you said, you learned from 2017. It was a bad year for you. But once you figured out the roster construction, and a lot of people maybe don't even think about that, right? They're looking at the player evaluations, they're looking at the values, they're looking at the ADPs. Do they know how to really construct a winning roster? That's key, isn't it?
Yeah, and that comes with experience because my first 5, 6, 7 years, that was not something I cared about. I just wanted to find the best players. Help me now. Tell me who the sleeper is right now. That's all I care about. And I never really cared about that. Just being a better player and learning those type of things that can help me in the future, not just right now.
Right.
Um, and then just having that. And I know my brother helped me a lot because he's been in my ear about that a little bit too. And he helped me kind of see that, I really need to reevaluate how I'm valuing these pitchers. I know I passed on. He wanted Chris Sale that year, and
Mhm,
and I just didn't want to pay the price. I was just so dead set in my ways of how I wanted to build a team, and
mhm.
this is the right way to do it. And I want my 90-90 with my first three guys, 90 bombs, 90 steals,
Yep.
and I just wasn't willing to bend on that at that point. But getting smacked in the face that year, it was what I needed to get me on the right track. And you know, I may have taken that first win for granted and not worked as hard as I needed to leading up into that second year,
Yep.
but I was not gonna be outworked going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like you said, 2018, won the Diamond Auction League. You won the New York $2,500 Auction Championship League. The next year you came back, 2019, won the Diamond Auction League again, won the Las Vegas 2,500 Auction Championship League. Did the same thing in 2021, and you finished second overall in the Auction Championship. I mean, my goodness, you're winning the 2,500s, you're winning the Diamonds 3 years in a row. It's almost like you've got this figured out. Did you?
Uh, yeah. As soon as you say that, though, you're gonna get smacked in the face. So I want to try to like stay humble about my process and make sure I'm not falling behind at all. But yeah, I do feel very comfortable right now with what I'm doing with my draft plan and how I construct it and the research I'm doing. I do all my own projections, and I mean, I guess what I'm about to say may not be that popular because this is kind of why I do my own stuff. If you take, I mean, Steamer, the Bad X, ATC, when you're taking a little bit of everything,
Mhm.
when you start to rely on projections, you're kind of putting yourself in the same boat as the rest of your competitors.
Yep.
And it can get a little scary because you can't always count on the projections to lead you in the right direction. Let me give you an example. So Steamer has Julio Urias as a 4.04 ERA for this coming up season, right?
Yep.
I have Urias at a 3 flat ERA, so I'm off by an entire run off of
Mhm.
the Steamer projection. But let me tell you how I get to my number, right? Urias has pitched 600 career innings at the major league level at a 2.83 ERA. He has an additional 310 innings in the minor league level at a 2.76. So 900 innings, right around a 2.8 ERA. He has a 95th percentile fastball and curveball spin rate, soft contact, 86-mile-per-hour exit velocity, which is 2.5 miles per hour below the league average. His control's been improving. He's got a big increase in his curveball usage, which is a nasty pitch. So if Steamer's trying to say that this is a 4 flat ERA guy, you're basically saying that everything he's done in his past 900 innings has just been lucky. He's just been hitting his 95th percentile outcome every year, every year. And I just think that you're off. You're wrong. And
Mhm.
if I'm using projections, you can't like unsee it. If I'm trying to evaluate Urias and I look at his Steamer, I can't just unsee a 404. It's gonna influence what you think of that type of player. And I could say, okay, I have him at a 3 flat. Steamer has him at a 4 flat. Maybe I'll split the difference and I'll have him at a 3.5. But even that's not the right thing to do because it's just
Mhm.
leading you further away from the right answer. You had it all along. So, I just I think projections are kind of like the holy grail. Like if you ever got it and you got it right, whoa, what an advantage it would give you. I mean, it would be huge. Um, but I just don't think we're quite there yet. So I guess the advice I would give to any fantasy players would be just be careful letting the projections influence you too much. If you can do your own research into the player pool, do it and really stick to your guns if you think you're right. But if you're not quite sure about a player, maybe he hit 20 bombs, then he hit 20, then he hit 35, and you're like, dang, should I regress this guy to 20, or is he a new player? Is this 35 what we're going to get going forward? If you're not sure, then maybe you use a projection to kind of help you along. But if you feel comfortable that you can evaluate the barrel rate and the exit velocity and the launch angles and fly ball, ground ball rates the Z swing and the O swing and the plate discipline. If you can evaluate all that stuff, and you feel comfortable doing it, then I think you can kind of gain an advantage. And so you're kind of on an island with what you have, versus being in the same boat as everybody else as far as that goes. And there is one more point I want to make too, is that when you rely on projections, you have to be careful because let me give you an example. Byron Buxton is projected to play 130 games, right? And I mean, I have news for you. Like, if he stays healthy, he's going to play 150 plus, right? So the projections are basically saying that Buxton's going to have a month-long DL stint. And what I want to know is, if I draft this guy and he does stay healthy, what am I going to get? So that's what I do. I project what I'm going to get if he stays healthy, and I just note it. With Buxton, it'll be like 80% chance of injury risk if you take this type of player. So yeah, I know I'm taking on some injury risk, but I want to be able to, compare Buxton's projection with like Juan Soto's projection. And right now, if you use Steamer, you have to like prorate Buxton's projections. They're taking so much of his time away based on a DL stint that may happen or may not.
Right.
So that's something to consider too if you're using projections.
Are you doing many of your own projections? You mentioned a couple of them there. I mean, do you actually do projections for hundreds of players?
Yeah, I go through the entire player pool, and I
Mhm.
and I and I do all of my own projections player to player.
Okay. So that's something that a lot of other people probably are not doing. Because I was going to ask you, so many people are doing draft champions and other drafts right now to learn the player pool, and that's what they're doing. You don't normally do that. You did a 400 last year and you won that league title, but that's the only one you did. So you're doing all of this work right now while other people are drafting, correct?
Yeah, I do plan on doing at least one draft champions, possibly two.
Hmm.
Um, so once I finish my draft plan, I'm gonna probably sign up for one or two of those.
But that's what you're doing right now, though. You're doing a lot of projections right now.
Yeah, right now I'm going through the player pool, coming up with my draft plan at each position, and once I finish that, I should be done in a couple of weeks. And at that point, I'll probably enter a DC or two, and then just keep basically at that point, I'm just keeping up to date on the current events. So
Right.
once spring starts, that'll be what I spend my time on.
Right. Do you use the ADPs? Do you use our average auction values? Is that important to you as well?
Totally. That's I think one of the biggest resources you can use
Yeah.
in auctions is having that information, for a couple of reasons. When you're going through the player pool, you have to have a number to get an idea of what the player is going to go for. Um, so if a player has an average auction value of 25 and you have them as a $25 player, then you can say, okay, I haven't properly valued. I'll buy this type of player if I can, but once it gets to this certain level, I'm probably going to lay off. So having that information definitely helps you identify who you have as targets based on, if I have a guy as a $30 player and he's going for 20, I'm definitely going to target that type of guy.
Right.
And vice versa, you know who you're going to fade based on who you think is overvalued based on how you value the type of players. So um, and then the other thing is, in draft day, having that information is super valuable, because if you see guys going over their average auction values,
Hmm.
say by $5, and it's happening pretty consistently, at some point in the auction, there's going to be players that are going for $5 less than their value, or five players going for $1 less. So at some point, there's going to be values, and so that can help you kind of track where that's going as far as the spending goes, and who you know during draft day.
Right. Right. Definitely. Well, let's talk about your process because, again, you are very, very unique. You come in, like you said, with sheets of paper, two or three players on each sheet of paper. You're crossing them off. You're making marks. You're looking for players. You know where they are, obviously. But then you do it all again with a whole new set of paper. I mean, you come in armed with papers like nobody else, right? It is unique what you do, correct?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. So I'll tell you what. I mean, what's on my sheets? I know I was on Rob DiPietro's
Yeah.
podcast, the Pull Hitter Pod, which is it's an awesome podcast. They do a lot of Rob does a lot of work as far as strategy talk, like we talked about earlier, making you a better player. So I was on his pod. We talked a little bit about what I have on my hitter side with, I have the 5 categories. Then I also have games played, at bats, strikeout percentage, expected average, exit velocity, barrel rate, and then earned auction value. And then I have injury history and any notes I find on the player. And then I also have their average auction value, what they went for in previous years, where they hit in the order, ADP. So those are the types of things. So I have a profile like that on each player. And for the arms, I also had the swing strike rate, their velo, K per walk, K percentage, walk percentage, innings pitched, games, um, and then the same type of blurbs underneath each. So if I'm in a situation where, all right, I'm planning on getting a guy for 20, but I'm not sure, I'm like, then I can look down and anything I want to see in that moment, how he's done in the spring, how many bombs he hit the last year, what he earned the last year. I don't have to memorize it. It's all right in front of me. And yeah, so it is what it is. It wastes a ton of paper. I'm coming in with like 200 sheets.
Yep.
But it's been something that's kind of evolved throughout the years as part of my process as far as that goes, and it's something I feel really really comfortable with.
Yeah, definitely. Don't argue with success. That's what I would say. So it works for you, and it's been working for quite some time too. I want to talk a little bit about next year or last year, I should say. It was your best year, but are there players? You don't have to give away any sleepers or anything, but you mentioned Buxton's an injury guy that a lot of people are different on. Urias, it's not just Steamer. There's other projection sites that have him with a terrible year, through high 3.5 or higher ERA, which I'm surprised at. Any other players that you think people are struggling with, that even you're struggling with to try to evaluate this year on whether this guy could be good or not good? And other people are saying, forget about him, like Urias.
Do you want to talk about hitters or
Sure,
pitchers?
either one.
Um, yeah, I would say the hardest hitters for me to evaluate are the younger ones, like a Corbin Carroll type
Hmm.
that I don't have a lot of data on.
Right.
And so that's always a tough one for me because it's hard to tell with the minor league numbers because the parks are so different.
Right.
Um, so
Well, like Julio
those,
Rodriguez last year would have been an example, right? You could have got him in the 15th, 16th round, and now all of a sudden he's a top five pick in this year's drafts.
yeah, totally. He was only going for $4 last year, and he,
Yeah.
he was a $27 player.
Yeah.
Walker for the Cardinals, Jordan Walker could be that
Yep.
type of guy this year.
Yep.
If he starts from the jump, he's got the power speed combination.
Yep. Saw him in
Yeah.
Arizona Fall League. He's a big kid. And he can hit the ball a ton. So, yeah, I would say Gunnar Henderson is another guy with the Orioles that people are struggling to know what type of value he's having. So, yeah, all good examples for sure. How about some starting pitchers?
Yeah. So a guy like a Tyler Glass now is a tough one because what he can possibly give you if he stays healthy, the type of guy he is. But then it's all up to your appetite for taking on risk
Hmm.
and what you can build around that type of guy. He's got a big time arm. A guy like Severino, is he going to come back to being an ace type?
Right.
He's an interesting player to take a look at. Like a Hunter Green,
Yep.
he's got great stuff. Can he progress as he gets older? Like a Freddie Peralta,
Yep.
can he was throwing in almost 94 and then it dipped to 93 last year because his shoulder was a little banged up.
Yep.
Can he get that arm healed up this offseason and come back throwing 94 this spring? If so, I think Peralta is an interesting guy to look at.
Yep.
Yeah, off the top of my head, those are some of the
Yep,
guys that
those are all
I'm going
good
to take a
ones.
look
I like Peralta this year bouncing back as well. Got a question from Brunch here. He says, "Do you try to watch as many games as possible, or more of just a stats cram on your guys for Sunday Fab?"
Yeah, I'm a ladder on that. I'm a stats cram type of guy. I don't watch a ton of baseball. as far as that goes. Maybe when my son gets older and he gets into it, I'll watch a few more games. But yeah, I'm almost all statistics, and some of the guys I don't even know what they look like. I have no, they're just a name to me. So yeah.
There you go. I think Gecko would appreciate that because he's a stats guy and doesn't watch much baseball either. He always says that. So, hey, I want to just touch on last year because it really was your best year. You entered 6 leagues, you won 4 league titles, you finished second in another one. You won the Diamond Auction League, the Ultimate Auction League, the 12-team Super League, and a $400 Draft Champions League. You finished second in the New York Auction, $2,500 Auction League. And just to prove that you were human, you finished 12th in the Diamond League. Can you just talk a little bit about last year and why were you so successful? I know it's the process. I know you've got her down now pretty good, but man, last year was your best year.
Yeah, so in my draft plan, I had Burns and Sandy Alcantara as my two like go get arms,
Mm,
and so I mean that was obviously a great start to my plan. Having because if you that's a really nasty 1-2 punch, and that clearly worked out with both of those players. But as I got closer to the season, I turned more towards DeGrom over Burns based on how he was looking in the spring and the upside I wanted to get. So I ended up getting 1 or 2 shares of Burns and then more shares of DeGrom.
mhm,
Um, and then, obviously DeGrom went down, put me in a hole, but I was able to climb out of that hole because I had the Sandys or the Max Frieds, or I had really solid 2, 3s, and 4s that got me through that tough start with DeGrom going down in the leagues I did have him and kept me
mhm,
competitive. So I think having the right pitcher plan was huge last year. Um, and then getting the right bats. I mean, Altuve was a target of mine. He was going for 17 on average, and I knew he was a $25 player. I mean, I
yep,
knew I didn't care what the projection said. I had him there. I knew he was going to run a little bit more, and he ended up being a $27 guy or whatever it was. So I picked up Altuve in a bunch of spots. Had him as a one of my prime targets.
mhm,
Um, yeah, so I think just like making sure you hit on some solid, durable players.
yep,
Um, and then obviously, I think having the right type of sleepers. I was planning on punting first base, and I had a lot of $1 first basemen that I really, really liked. And Christian
mm,
Walker being one of them. I had 5 shares of him. He was a
yep,
difference maker for me. Yeah, that was
awesome,
just having the right plan and going in with the
yep,
right guys in mind to target was, I- you know,
excellent.
and then
So
getting
good.
lucky, having them stay healthy was huge.
Yeah, health is key, no doubt about it. Hey, heading into this year, we've got several rules changes. I'm wondering if you're taking that into consideration. It could affect the hitters, obviously. We got the ban on the shift, which could help, batting averages for left-handed hitters. We've got the bigger bases and the limited amount of throws to first base. I don't know if people realize that, but they can only throw over twice this year to first base, so that could help some base stealers. Are any of these rules changes affecting your draft strategies and even the projections for some of the players that you're doing right now?
Yeah, I'm definitely aware of that stuff. I think the expected average that I'm using is kind of covering a lot of that for me, though. With Seager,
Okay.
for example, his expected average was 282 last year. So I
Mhm.
don't care that he hit 240. It's already kind of factoring in what he would do without a shift. Like even like a guy like Tellez, he hit 210, but his expected average was almost 250.
Yep.
So if you use expected average, that will kind of get you in the right direction as far as some of the players that were getting robbed a lot by the shift. Those left-handed pull hitter guys,
Mhm.
are typically the ones that will benefit this season. A few more of their grounders are going to pop through there.
Yep.
And as far as the stolen bases go, this is an interesting thing for me. Like some of the guys that give you nothing may be a little less desirable this season because
Right.
the guys that run a little bit, the guys that steal 5 bags, like a Rizzo, or a Mountcastle, that may go from 5 to 10. And the guys that don't run at all, I really don't see that changing because they don't run for a reason.
Mhm.
Like I don't know, a Eloy Jimenez, for example. So maybe getting a few more 5 steal guys that could pop to 10 might be something to look at this season, and devaluing the guys that don't run at all, the zeros, because they ain't, the zero's not
Right.
going anywhere
Right.
for those guys. So,
Yeah.
a 5 could turn to 10, a 10 could turn to 15, some of the 20s could turn, so that's something to definitely think about.
Yeah, I think stolen bases is going to be very interesting this year. I'm not sure, like you say, that guys who don't run, they're not going to run just because the base is a couple inches longer or they can't throw over more than 2 times. But the guys who can steal, they're going to take advantage of this. So it'll be very interesting, I think, the stolen bases. Hey, let's talk about the MTM Ultimate Invitational in New York. You're joining that this year. I said this to Bob Cramatola, who's also joining this. If you win it, Mike the Mouth will never talk to you again. So, why did you decide to join that league? I know you're coming to New York anyways for the auctions.
Yeah, yeah. I knew I was going to be there for the $2,500 auction, and that's a league that I think I did it once before, and
Yeah,
I loved it. It was a great experience.
yeah.
So as for me, I would if I'm doing 8 leagues, I would like them to be 8 auctions. But I filled up all the auctions. I got and I had a couple spots left for a few of the snakes, and that was one of the snakes I decided to get in. It's an awesome event. And that's something I'm super looking forward to being down there
Yeah,
with that
definitely.
bunch. Hopefully,
Yep,
they
that's a
stay out of
great league,
trouble.
and it's a lot of fun. Mike makes it big, and everyone goes out to eat afterwards, and yeah, it's a good time. Hey, real quickly, if you are selecting KDS in a draft league this year, do you have any preference where you want to draft? I mean, a 15-teamer. Some people like the front. Some people always like the middle. Some people even like the back end. Any preference for you at this point?
Yeah, last season I wanted to stick in the middle because that's where about Burns and Degrom are going. I wanted them
Hmm.
with my first. This year, with the ADP of the pitchers falling back towards the 15s,
Yep.
maybe I do want to be in the back end this year to see if I can get that at least one start arm with my first 2 picks.
Yeah.
So I think the back end, if I had a draft now, is where I'd want to be. Um, I want to do a little more look. I want to look into Acuna a little more, Turner,
Hmm.
and some of those like top elite guys, and see if I'm willing to just say the heck with it. I'm going to roll with that, and then so that's something I'm going to think about. But if it started tomorrow, I think being 13 would
Hmm.
be almost perfect for me. I can still get a stud, a bat, and then come back with a Burns or a Cole
Yep.
and be off and running.
Yeah, they've been dropping so far, as we know, when we get to the main event or the high dollar ones. The starting pitchers always seem to climb back up. But right now, there's some leagues or drafts that don't even have a starting pitcher going in the first round outside of Otani, who's being used for his bat. So, really interesting. All right, like we said, we're going to honor you in Las Vegas on that Saturday morning before the main event. We've got a huge stage in the Grand Ballroom at the Mirage. We're going to bring up past Hall of Famers. We're going to bring up past national champions, and we're going to bring yourself up there. I mean, are you ready to be honored in front of hundreds of our top fantasy players?
I'm just gonna roll with it. I'm not a great public speaker, but I'll see if I can come up with anything decent. And I'm just gonna have fun. Take a couple shots of whiskey first, and then just have a great time with it.
Good. Bring it up on the stage. I could use a shot while I'm up there as well. So I like that an awful lot. So, Shawn, it's been a pleasure talking with you tonight. We've known each other since you called me in 2007. I remember you when you wanted to get into these leagues, and we talked an awful lot. So, you've done a hell of a job in the last 15 years. You are now an NFBC Hall of Famer. I'm proud to call you an NFBC Hall of Famer. And I'll see you in New York City. I'll see you in Las Vegas. And I promise we're going to have a good time. So, best of luck in all your leagues. And Shawn, thanks again for joining me tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. Thanks for having me. And I really want to thank the NFBC. The company that you run has been unbelievable, not only to me and the rest of the fantasy baseball community, but it's been something that's reliable, ethical. You're bringing all the best players in the world playing for top dollar, and it's the best fantasy baseball you can get on the planet. So I'm thankful for that, and I really appreciate everything you've done in the NFBC with you, Tom, and Dar.
Well, thank you much. It's been 20 years of a lot of fun. A lot of ups and downs, obviously, and the lockout last year did not help. The pandemic the last 2 years did not help, but we're clear sailing right now this year, everybody. So join the NFBC. You can find us at playnfbc.com. Shawn Johnson, the ninth NFBC Hall of Famer. Come to New York City, you'll meet him there. Come to Las Vegas to the Mirage, March 23rd through the 26th. You'll meet him there as well. And we'll all have whiskey together. I know I'm going to have Coronas for sure, but that whiskey sounds good, Shawn. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And we'll see you either in the draft room or live in Las Vegas or New York City. Thanks, everyone. See you later.